What's up, MetaNerdz? This video is all about a Trade Federation cruiser that once helped the Jedi and carried a squadron of their A6 Interceptors. Though the bridge and look of the sides is similar to the Lucrehulk, it was not produced by Horish Kessel Drive, but instead by Kuat Drive Yards. KDY would later make nearly all of the Republic's war vessels, directly producing things like the Venator and Arquitans, but also the Juggernaut and ATTE through their subsidiary Rathana Heavy Engineering. But nearly 200 years before the Clone Wars, the Trade Defense Force purchased several of these carriers along with Munifex-class cruisers. They were deployed to the Rasik sector to confront pirates that had been harassing a system that had just entered into the Trade Federation. This confrontation would foreshadow the Stark Hyperspace War of 44 BBY. The Stark Commercial Combine was a band of smugglers, pirates, mercenaries, bounty hunters, and assassins who all worked together to challenge the Trade Federation. Their leader took advantage of a crisis at a Bacta facility to launch his band into galactic infamy. A major explosion at the galaxy's primary Bacta production plant dramatically reduced the supply of the healing blue liquid that was vital to so many medical procedures. Core worlds consolidated all their Bacta and tried to buy up reserves, but most Outer Rim worlds couldn't afford it at the new high prices. The fleets of the SCC would raid Bacta shipments meant for the core and sell them throughout the Outer Rim at prices that were lower than anyone else could. Because the Trade Federation had the largest trade network across the galaxy, it was their Captor-class ships that were often transporting the blue gold. Its internal areas in these arms could be filled with cargo, but it would increasingly be filled with fighters and droids made for the Trade Defense Force. When attacked, these droid fighters could rapidly deploy from this central hangar, but the Federation just wasn't powerful enough at this time to repel a coordinated attack by a gang of hardened criminals. That is why the Republic had to get involved, as the TF demanded that either the Jedi and Judicial forces destroy the Stark Commercial Combine, or they would be forced to stop trade and let the TDF become a fully operational military. To prevent this, the Republic dedicated several corvettes and fighters, but the real blow to Stark's operation came when the Trade Federation allowed the use of several captors to launch a surprise attack. Dozens of A6 Interceptors that had both Republic pilots and Jedi were deployed at a stunning speed from the Trade Federation's carrier. So just 8 years before the blockade over Naboo, the Federation and Jedi were working as close allies. But this ship's relationship with the Republic would actually continue up through 29 BBY, when Wraith Sinar was assigned one by Will of Tarkin. The ship was named the Admiral Corvin and was considered old by this time, but with its complement, we can get a rough estimate of the Captor Size. During a mission to Zonama Sekot, this ship contained 30 Vulture droids, 3,000 B-1 battle droids, an unknown amount of E-5 battle droids, 100 human troops, and 3 C-9979 landing craft. Even if we ignore the space the droids would have taken up, as they could be densely packed on racks, and the Vultures could probably hang from the ceiling like they did in the Lucrehulk, just the landing craft would have required this hangar to be around 400 meters wide. The problem with that is that we get insane dimensions for this thing, like 3,200 meters long and 1,800 meters wide, which would make it about twice the dimensions of the Imperial Star Destroyer. Instead, I think we just have to assume that the C-9979 wasn't fully assembled inside of this ship, like with what we see in the core ship's cross-section. If we look at this lineup, I believe we get a much more reasonable reference. We would get a length of 544.5 meters or 1,786 feet, which was about 2/3 a Munificent, and about 1/3 an Imperial Star Destroyer. And at a width of 340 meters or 1,116 feet, it was more than twice the width of the Requisite-class light destroyer. While at a height of 276 meters or 906 feet, it was actually taller than the Venator. If it were to show up here on Earth, it would be about 1.5 times the length of the Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, about half the height of the One World Trade Center building, and 1.5 times the width of the Great Pyramid. So you can see that even with these smaller dimensions, it is easy to picture all of these droids and ships fitting into this thing, as long as the landing craft had a novel way of leaving the hangar. After this ship's use by Wraith Sinar, we don't ever again hear of its use by either the Republic or the Trade Federation. I would assume this is because the CIS had a bunch of other good carriers by this time, and the Captor class had been around for about 200 years by the time of the Clone Wars. So that's it for its history, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. The ship's first appearance is in the comic Star Wars Republic 36, and the Sinar story comes from the novel Rogue Planet. Additional details come from the Essential Guide to Warfare, which first named it as the Heavy Munitions Carrier. There are mods for Empire at War that feature a similar design, with artists that I have linked to in the description. Also, I found this ship in the comic, which looks like it was definitely designed similar to the Captor, but has this kind of C-70 looking bridge and more engines. I don't know what it is, but definitely let me know if you do in the comments down below. The closest thing I have is that Tarkin once had a former Trade Federation ship known as the Rim Merchant Inim, which was said to be a smaller cousin of the Lucrehulk. Then there's also this diplomatic cruiser that has these extra escape pods, so I could use some help identifying this one too. But that's it for the Captor class. If you want to connect with us, help support the channel, or get your own copies of the reference materials used to make these videos, be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. But most important of all, remember, beware the Trade Federation haulers bearing Jedi Interceptors, and the Force will be with you, always.